Okay, so one of the best revision exercises that you can do are practice questions. So we're going to go through some practice questions in the Peace and Conflict unit on paper 2 for Islam. Here are the list of questions that we're going to focus on. We're focusing on the 4 and 5 mark questions. That's because they're a good starting point for revising the content of the unit. I would strongly recommend that you pause the video here and have a look through those questions and maybe choose a couple of them to mind map and just write down what you can remember of the topics of these before I go through and explain what you need to know for each question. Okay, I think by this time in the course you should understand the RS mantra and how you set out your answers. So this is a 4 mark question. The box on the right there gives you some sentence starters. So I'm not going to convert the content on the left into that. What I'll do is I'll explain the bullet points and then you should pause the video and use the bullet points on the left and write them out in full using the sentence starters using the RS mantra on the right of the screen. What are the Muslim beliefs about the importance of peace? Well, Muslims are called to be peaceful as the first bullet point. Remember that the word Islam comes from the Arabic term for peace, which is salam. So it's got that basis in there. So Islam is supposed to be a religion of peace. And therefore what goes against Islam goes against peace. It says in the Quran there not to follow in the footsteps of Shaitan. That's another word for Satan or the devil. And that quote literally just says that Muslims should not follow the Satan's footsteps. Surely he is your sworn enemy. So it's not saying anything specific about peace. It's just talking about resisting the temptations of Satan. The second bullet point, Muslims should walk upon the earth lightly and therefore respond to acts of aggression with peace. So this is based on Surah 25. I've put the quote actually below. There are different translations. So in the translation I found here, it said, walk on the earth humbly. So humbly means, not with arrogance, not violently, not with aggression, but kind of peacefully, so that when the foolish address them improperly, then they respond with peace. So when someone is aggressive towards a Muslim, they should respond in a peaceful way. I would recommend sort of memorizing the quote or the key idea of the quote. So what you've got in the bullet point, I would put in quotation marks and just make sure you structure it so that you've got 2 separate points. They've kind of split it in half. Think about how you would write that out so that it's clear that you're making a point and you're developing it. You could quote or you could put the same points in quotation marks and say in the Quran. Don't worry too much about memorizing that it's the 25th surah and it's verse 63. Just remember the quote and use that. Muslims should keep peace in the Ummah. So the Ummah is just the community of Muslims. And we'll look a bit later at what it says in the Quran about how Muslims should respond where there's conflict within the Muslim community of the Ummah. Okay, this is a fairly straightforward one. Again, I'll go through the bullet points. You should pause the video and take those bullet points and transform them into the RS mantra. Let me just explain a few points. So Muslims should promote equality and religious freedom. So remember that for Muslims, the idea of peace is not just the absence of war and conflict, but the peace is about living in a society where people are treated equally, where they have freedom, where there's justice. And so standing out firmly for justice, one of the quotes from the Quran, that's also an element of creating a world of peace. So Muslims will work in local groups to spread those kind of messages of justice and peace that are important to Islam. Muslims can also form pressure groups and groups like Muslim Aid, which works for peace and helps people around the world. There are also groups in Britain like the Muslim Council of Britain that ensure that Muslim beliefs are understood and not misrepresented, which is the second part of that bullet point. Muslims can obviously pray for peace and work alongside other religious groups. So that's what multi-faith groups means, groups of other religions. So the British Council of Muslims will work with Hindu groups or Christian groups or Jewish groups to try and promote peace. So pause the video here and give this question a go. Use those bullet points and write them up using the RS mantra. Okay, so how do Muslims respond to problems of conflict in society? So Muslims should stand against aggression. So in Surah 2, we've got this very famous quote, "Fight in the cause of Allah only against those who wage war against you, but do not exceed the limits. Allah does not like transgressors." So particularly the first point of that part of that quote, fight in the cause of Allah against those who wage war against you. So the idea that Muslims should stand up against aggression, they should do that in order to restore peace and prevent suffering. So use the structure there. I would recommend that you use a bit of a quote from the Quran rather than just trying to remember which surah it is. So remember that fight in the cause of Allah against those who wage war against you. That's a quote that you can use in this question. If two groups of Muslims are fighting, the Quran teaches that Muslims must make peace between them. I would actually put that in quotation marks. So it says there, Surah 49, verse 9, but instead of trying to memorize the number, what they've said there is a kind of summary of what it says, because the Quran says, if two groups of believers fight each other, then make peace between them. So that's what you've said in the first one. So just in the Quran, it says, if two groups, and just put that in quotation marks. If one group is acting against Islam, then they should be brought back under Allah's rules and to restore peace in society. Again, that second part is just the continuation of that quote. It says, but if one of them transgresses against the other, so transgresses means to do what's wrong, against the other, then fight against the transgressing group, the wrong group, until they are willing to submit to the rule of Allah. It's quite a long quote, but again, you can see that it's basically been summarized. So again, essentially that second part could also be quoted, but if you've already quoted in the first half, you can just explain it as has been done in that bullet point. And then the third one, Muslims are commanded to do good. Again, just put that in quotation marks, because Surah 2 verse 195 literally just says, do good, for Allah certainly loves the good doers. So Muslims in the Quran, Muslims are commanded to do good as Allah loves those who do good. That's the quote. This means their actions should work to benefit society. So pause the video here, use those bullet points and convert them into the RS mantra. Okay, so remember that pacifism is the belief that violence and war and conflict is always wrong, and that you should never be involved in fighting. Some pacifists would even go as far as to say not even in self-defense. So that's the idea of pacifism. So most Muslims, it says there's some, but most Muslims would reject the idea of pacifism. So that's one attitude, one mark. Particularly because if the religion is under threat. So we've looked at the quote already from Surah 2, fight in the cause of Allah against those who wage war against you. So the Quran teaches that if there is aggression against Muslims, then they should defend themselves and be prepared to fight. Muslims also, many Muslims would accept the idea of just war, which we've looked at in class. There's obviously certain conditions. That's what makes it a just war: when you're fighting against evil, when it's been called to a fight by a legitimate Muslim authority, and so on. So you can develop that in a number of ways. However, another Muslim attitude to pacifism would be to accept it. So they might think that that modern weapons used in modern warfare will always end up killing the innocent and destroying the environment, and that just war says that you shouldn't do that. So if all forms of war today are going to kill innocent people and destroy the environment, then it's not really possible to have a just war. So Muslims might be in favor of pacifism for that reason. We also looked, so it's not one of the bullet points here, but we also looked at the story of Cain and Abel in the Quran, where Cain killed his brother Abel. But as he tells his brother he's going to kill him, Abel responds, this is a quote from the Quran, "If you raise your hand to kill me, I will not raise mine to kill you." because I fear Allah. So that sounds like a kind of pacifist viewpoint. Even though you're being violent, I'm not going to be violent as well. Further on in that story, there's also the quote, whoever takes a life, it will be as if they killed all of humanity. So that can be interpreted in a pacifist way. Although remember, in the Quran, in between that, it actually says, whoever takes a life, unless as a punishment for murder or mischief in the land, it will be as if they killed all of humanity. So that shows that it can be right to take life in certain circumstances. Then that would mean you wouldn't be a pacifist. So pause the video and have a go at this question. This is a question about just war. So some of the points that we made in the previous slide can also be used here, because an attitude towards just war could be to reject it in the cause of pacifism, or to accept it, as we looked at. So again, we've got similar quotes here. Muslims must fight if the faith is threatened. Those who believe fight in the cause of Allah, and some of the quotes that we've looked at earlier could be used as well. A just war is ordained by Allah, so it might be for a just cause, and believers should not hesitate. So again, where they're fighting to preserve Islam, where it's been commanded by a religious authority, where they're stopping mischief in the land, stopping those who are attacking Islam, to restore peace, and so on. In a just war, Allah may restrain the military might of those who disbelieve. So Allah is greater in might and stronger in punishment, is a quote there that you could use. And there's also the idea that fighting in the way of Allah brings rewards, that when Muslims fight for the right reasons, they will be rewarded even if they die. So use those bullet points. Obviously, you just need to select 2 of them, convert them into the RS mantra. Pause the video here to give that a go. Okay, and very closely related to a just war is the idea of a holy war. A holy war is when it's fought in the name of Islam and in order to protect the Muslim religion, whereas a just war could be about restoring peace and opposing those who are oppressive or aggressors fighting against you. So there's various teachings about holy war in the Quran. It says, fight in the way of Allah, those who fight you. Again, that's a quote we've already looked at a few times. So Muslims should fight in defense of Islam, but only in defense when it comes to a holy war, not for other reasons. Sometimes it's known as jihad. So there's 2 different senses of jihad, and the lesser jihad can involve military response, but there are strict rules that are set down in order for that to be legitimate. That means that it's the right thing to do and allowed, and not illegitimate, which means it would transgress the limits. It would go against what God has set for you to how to act. So these include rules concerning the reasons for going to war and how it should be conducted. In Surah 60, it says that this is important since Allah may also reunite previous enemies, so that while they're enemies, they could in the future put affection between them. That means friendship. They could become friends again. The Quran also teaches that if you die fighting, then there's a reward. So we've mentioned that already, and that's in Surah 3. Do not think of those who have been killed in the cause of Allah as dead, rather they are alive with their Lord. And think about how, again, the story of Cain and Abel, those who pursue peace will be rewarded, those who pursue violence will be punished. So the ideas of heaven and hell. So pause the video here, use those ideas, and convert them into the RS mantra. This is the last one we're going to look at. It's a 5 marker. It's about the weapons of mass destruction. So weapons of mass destruction are modern weapons like nuclear bombs that destroy huge areas. So you can think about the end of the Second World War, where America used nuclear weapons against Japan and bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So these are 2 cities, and you had hundreds of thousands of people killed, just ordinary people who happened to live in those cities, and even for many, many years after, those who survived were obviously kind of infected by the nuclear, like the nuclear waste that came from that, which causes all sorts of deformities and health problems. So weapons of mass destruction, because they kill indiscriminately, that means they kill everybody, not just the bad people. And the Quran says that killing a soul without good reason is as if you've slain humanity entirely. Okay, this is the quote that from the Cain and Abel story that we've already looked at. Again, it's a slightly different translation. So remember that quote is a really useful one for many different topics. So many innocents die when, say, a nuclear bomb is used, and so Muslims should be against that. Second bullet point, Muhammad taught Muslims that they should wish for your brother what you wish for yourself. So it's like the golden rule, do unto others what you would have them do to you. Weapons of mass destruction obviously impact people in a way that you wouldn't want that for yourself. So that could be applied there. And the use of nuclear weapons, third bullet point, has massive and persistent effects on the environment. So it doesn't just kill lots of people, it destroys obviously buildings, but also trees and the environment. So it could create a kind of a whole dead area because of the nuclear waste that comes from it. And Allah, according to the Quran, is the creator of the environment and created the world in balance. And so there's a few verses from Surah 55 that talk about how Allah created the sun and the moon and various other, the whole creation to be in a kind of harmony and balance, and that destroying it would obviously go against Allah. So again, pause the video here and give that question a go. I hope you found this helpful, kind of going through and explaining the content. It's really important though that you read through the bullet points yourself and apply them to the questions and practice writing them out so that you're in good preparation for the exam. Thank you very much.